The spray paint hissed like a venomous snake, its toxic green mist coating the innocent snowman with calculated precision. Margaret Holloway, known to her suburban battlefield as the most feared HOA board member, didn't even flinch as the neighborhood children watched in horror. 12-year-old Tommy Martinez stood frozen, his mittened hands clenched at his sides, mouth agape. The snowman he'd spent hours crafting, complete with a carefully placed carrot nose and buttons made from river stones collected during last summer's family camping trip, was now dripping with an unnatural toxic shade of green that looked like something between radioactive slime and municipal building paint. "Unapproved exterior structure," Margaret muttered, her voice as crisp and sharp as the winter wind cutting through Pinewood Estates' manicured cul-de-sac. Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the Homeowners Association bylaws clearly states that any non-standard decorative element requires explicit written permission from the Architectural Review Committee. Tommy's mother, Alina, burst out of their front door, her work scrubs still on from her hospital shift. "What the hell are you doing?" she screamed, breath visible in the cold December air. Margaret straightened her perfectly pressed camel hair coat, her reading glasses perched exactly halfway down her nose. She held up a clipboard like a weapon. "Mrs. Martinez, I'm documenting the violation. This snowman exceeds the maximum height of 36 inches and uses non-approved materials. The river stones are not listed in our acceptable decorative element catalog." The neighborhood watched. Some peeked through blinds. Others pretended to be checking their mailboxes. But everyone was watching Margaret, the HOA Karen who ran Pinewood Estates like a military compound disguised as a suburban paradise. Tommy's father, Roberto, a high school physics teacher, stepped forward. "It's a snowman," he said slowly, as if explaining a complex concept to a particularly obtuse student. "A temporary structure made of snow. By definition, it cannot be a permanent architectural modification." Margaret's lips compressed into a thin line. "Temporary structures require pre-approval. This snowman violates multiple community standards. The green spray paint is merely documentation of the infraction." Children on the street whispered and pointed. Tommy's eyes welled with tears, not from sadness, but from a burning anger that was far too mature for his 12 years. He'd watched his mother work double shifts at the hospital, his father grade papers late into the night. And now this woman was destroying something pure he created. Elena stepped forward, her hospital ID clinking against her scrub top. "You cannot do this. This is harassment." But Margaret was already typing into her tablet, documenting the violation with the methodical precision of a surgeon performing a routine procedure. Each tap was a nail in the metaphorical coffin of Tommy's snowman, and potentially the Martinez family standing in the neighborhood. The green paint dripped, the snowman stood mutely, and Margaret Holloway smiled. A smile that said she had just won another battle in her ongoing war against spontaneity, joy, and childhood wonder in Pinewood Estates. The emergency HOA meeting was called for precisely 7:15 p.m. the following Tuesday, Margaret Holloway's preferred time, when most working parents would be juggling dinner, homework, and bedtime routines. Roberto Martinez arrived first, his physics teacher's briefcase clutched like a shield. Elena had been called in for an extra hospital shift, leaving him to defend their family's honor. The community center's fluorescent lights flickered with the intensity of impending drama, casting harsh shadows across the room's beige walls decorated with HOA bylaws and passive-aggressive neighborhood guidelines. "The incident with the Martinez snowman represents a clear and present danger to our community standards," Margaret announced, her pointer finger tapping a meticulously prepared PowerPoint slide. The image of Tommy's now destroyed snowman filled the screen, the toxic green spray paint looking almost radioactive. Jack Peterson, the retired military contractor who lived 2 doors down from the Martinez family, leaned forward. "It's a snowman, Margaret. A kid's winter project." "Correction," Margaret interjected, pushing her reading glasses up with surgical precision. "It's an unauthorized exterior modification that threatens the carefully maintained aesthetic of Pinewood Estates." The other board members, a mix of semi-retired professionals and part-time busybodies, shifted uncomfortably. They knew Margaret's reputation. She'd successfully sued a neighbor for planting tulips 2 inches outside the approved flower bed dimensions. She forced another family to repaint their entire house because the initial shade of beige was 3% darker than the community-approved palette. Roberto's hand shot up. "This is ridiculous. My son spent hours building that snowman. It was temporary. It harmed no one." Margaret pulled out a thick binder. Section 4, subsection C clearly states that all exterior decorative elements, whether permanent or temporary, must be pre-approved by the Architectural Review Committee. Your son's snowman violated multiple provisions. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Outside, a winter wind whipped through the parking lot, sending dead leaves skittering across pristine asphalt. asphalt that, no doubt, met Margaret's exacting standards. We're talking about a child's creativity Robert oppressed. He used natural materials, river stones, a carrot, snow. Unregistered river stones, Margaret corrected. Potential environmental hazards, non-standard decorative elements, improper height-to-base ratio. Tommy's science teacher, Ms. Ramirez, who had reluctantly attended the meeting, spoke up. Margaret, it's winter. Children build snowmen. It's what they do. A collective murmur rippled through the room. Some nodded. Others looked nervous. Margaret Holloway did not lose battles. She could process them, strategize them, and surgically dismantled any opposition. Motion to fine the Martinez family for exterior modification violations. Margaret announced, her voice cutting through potential dissent. Proposed fine, $250 with additional daily penalties until full compliance is achieved. Robert's face turned several shades of red, not from anger, but from the precise, bureaucratic violence being unleashed against his family. This wasn't about a snowman. This was about control, about breaking spirits through endless paperwork and petty regulations. As the vote was called, the fluorescent lights seemed to flicker with anticipation. Tommy's snowman had become more than a childhood creation. It was now a symbol of resistance against Margaret Holloway's suburban tyranny. While adults talked and argued, 12-year-olds had their own forms of warfare. Armed with a smartphone, a working knowledge of social media, and a burning sense of injustice, Tommy began documenting everything. He created an Instagram account at Pinewood State Horrors. The first post featured a side-by-side image of his destroyed snowman, green-painted and pathetic, with Margaret Holloway's perfectly manicured front yard. Caption: when HOA Karen destroys childhood creativity. Hashtag HOA nightmare. Hashtag snowman justice. Within hours, the post went viral. Local news stations caught wind of the story. A reporter from Channel 5, Sarah Jenkins, saw potential for a human interest piece that would skewer bureaucratic overreach. She'd been looking for a story that would showcase the absurdity of homeowners associations, and Tommy's snowman was pure gold. This isn't just about a snowman, Sarah told her camera operator. This is about the systematic suppression of childhood imagination by power-hungry HOA board members. Roberto and Elena were initially hesitant. As professionals, a teacher and a nurse, they understood the risks of public confrontation. But Tommy's determination was infectious. He'd already created hashtags. He contacted local parent groups. He even reached out to a few internet meme pages that specialized in ridiculous bureaucratic stories. Margaret Holloway, meanwhile, was preparing her counteroffensive. She spent Wednesday evening compiling a 17-page document detailing every potential violation the Martinez family had ever committed. The recycling bin placed 3 inches outside the designated area. The slightly overgrown shrubs. The Halloween decorations that had exceeded the approved height by 2.5 inches. Her fingers flew across her keyboard, each keystroke a missile aimed at destroying the Martinez family's reputation in Pinewood Estates. Jack Peterson, the retired military contractor and the only board member who seemed remotely reasonable, tried to intervene. Margaret, it's a snowman. A child's project. This is becoming ridiculous. She couldn't even look up. Precedent is precedent, Jack. If we let one violation slide, the entire fabric of our community standards will unravel. Tommy's social media campaign was working. Screenshots of Margaret's previous enforcement actions began circulating. People shared stories of her past crusades. The family forced to remove a basketball hoop. The couple sued for an unauthorized wind chime. The elderly resident threatened with fines for a bird feeder. The Martinez family became local heroes. Parents from across the suburban landscape rallied behind them, sharing their own HOA horror stories. Tommy's Instagram gained thousands of followers. Meme pages picked up the story. Local Reddit threads exploded with discussions about HOA power dynamics. Margaret watched her carefully constructed world begin to crack. She'd always believed that rules were the thin line between civilization and chaos, that every regulation, no matter how small, served a greater purpose. But now a 12-year-old with a smartphone was systematically dismantling her reputation. The green-painted snowman stood as a symbol of resistance, a beacon of childhood defiance against suburban bureaucracy. And Margaret Holloway was about to declare total war. The cease and desist letter arrived on Thursday morning, delivered by a courier with the precision of a military operation. Margaret Holloway had enlisted her nephew, Bradley, a junior associate at a local law firm specializing in municipal and property disputes. His crisp pinstripe suit and aggressive legal language screamed of familial loyalty and professional ambition. The continued digital harassment and defamation campaign conducted by minor Thomas Martinez and his familial supporters constitutes a clear violation of community standards and digital conduct protocols, the letter read. It demanded the immediate removal of all social media posts, a public apology, and a substantial financial penalty. Elena Martinez intercepted the letter before Tommy could see it. Her nursing shift had just ended, and she was running on 3 hours of sleep and enough caffeine to power a small research facility. She read the document twice, then laughed, a sound that was one part exhaustion, one part pure defiance. "They're trying to scare us," she told Roberto over breakfast. Tommy, who had been quietly eating his cereal, looked up. "I'm not taking anything down." The local media had already picked up the story. Channel 5's Sarah Jenkins was preparing a primetime segment. Local parent groups had organized a snowman solidarity event for the upcoming weekend, complete with children building snowmen all across Pinewood Estates. Bradley Holloway was not prepared for this level of grassroots resistance. His legal training had prepared him for corporate disputes and property line arguments. But a 12-year-old social media warrior and a community of supportive parents, this was uncharted territory. Margaret called an emergency strategy meeting in her home office, a room that looked more like a war room than a typical suburban workspace. Meticulously organized binders lined the walls. Color-coded sticky notes mapped out potential legal strategies. The large whiteboard featured a complex diagram of the Martinez family's supposed infractions. "We need to crush this," Margaret told Bradley. "Not just win. Crush." Jack Peterson, the retired military contractor, had other ideas. He'd been quietly investigating Margaret's past enforcement actions. Years of meticulous record-keeping were about to pay off. He discovered a pattern of selective enforcement that bordered on harassment. "This isn't about community standards," Jack told Margaret during a heated phone call. "This is about power, about breaking people's spirits." Margaret's response was typical. "Rules are rules, Jack. Without consistent enforcement, we have chaos." Meanwhile, Tommy had discovered a new weapon. His computer science teacher had helped him create a website, homeowners.com. It became a central hub for people to share their most ridiculous homeowners association stories. Submissions poured in from across the country. The website crashed twice from traffic. Local politicians began to take notice. A city council member reached out, suggesting potential legislation to limit HOA powers. Tommy's simple act of defiance was becoming a movement. Bradley Holloway sat in his office, staring at the growing file. This was supposed to be a simple case, a quick legal takedown. Now it was turning into a public relations nightmare. Margaret Holloway had always believed in the power of rules, but she was about to learn that sometimes the most powerful force is a child with a smartphone and a sense of justice. The Snowman Solidarity event transformed the neighborhood into a landscape of rebellion. Every lawn sprouted snowmen, some traditional, some wildly creative, all standing as silent protesters against Margaret Holloway's tyranny. Children and parents worked together, building snow sculptures that ranged from classic carrot-nosed figures to elaborate snow beings that looked like they might come to life at any moment. Tommy Martinez stood at the center of it all, his green-painted snowman's memory immortalized by dozens of new creations. His science teacher, Ms. Ramirez, had brought her entire class to participate. Each student carried a small placard with a QR code linking to homeowners.com. Margaret watched from her living room window, her hands gripping a steaming cup of chamomile tea so tightly her knuckles turned white. This was more than a neighborhood revolt. This was a full-scale insurrection. Jack Peterson coordinated with other longtime residents who had suffered under Margaret's reign. They began digging through old HOA records, uncovering a pattern of selective enforcement that painted a damning picture. Margaret had systematically targeted families who didn't fit her narrow definition of suburban perfection: young families, single parents, families of color, anyone who didn't conform to her idealized community standard. The local news arrived in full force. Sarah Jenkins from Channel 5 set up her camera right in the middle of the snowman display, her report capturing the community's spirit of defiance. "What started as a dispute over a child's snowman has become something much larger," she reported, her microphone capturing the sounds of children laughing and snow crunching underfoot. "This is about more than decoration. This is about community, creativity, and standing up to bureaucratic overreach." Bradley Holloway's legal strategy was crumbling. The cease and desist letters became weapons used against his aunt, shared widely on social media as examples of petty harassment. Online legal forums picked up the story, offering pro bono advice to the Martinez family. Alina and Roberto stood together, watching their son become an unlikely hero. Tommy had transformed from a kid whose snowman was destroyed to a symbol of resistance. Margaret's phone rang constantly. HOA board members were jumping ship. The community's GoFundMe for potential legal fees had raised over $50,000 in just 48 hours. Local politicians started positioning themselves as champions of homeowner rights. "This isn't about a snowman anymore," Roberto told a reporter. "This is about the soul of our community, about who we are and how we treat each other. Inside her meticulously organized home, Margaret began to realize the true cost of her crusade. Years of building power, of enforcing every-minute rule, were dissolving faster than snow in spring sunlight. Jack Peterson delivered the final blow during an emergency HOA meeting. He presented a comprehensive report documenting Margaret's history of selective enforcement, discrimination, and abuse of power. The evidence was overwhelming. Years of careful record-keeping had created an irrefutable case against her. As the snowman stood sentinel across Pinewood Estates, a new community was being born. One that valued creativity over conformity. One that protected its children and celebrated their spirit. Tommy Martinez had started a revolution with nothing more than a snowman and a smartphone. The state-level hearing convened on a crisp February morning, transforming a mundane municipal conference room into the epicenter of suburban rebellion. Tommy Martinez sat between his parents, wearing the same green sweater he'd worn when he first spray-painted a memorial to his destroyed snowman. The room buzzed with an energy that felt simultaneously like a community meeting and a revolutionary tribunal. State Representative Linda Gonzalez had taken personal interest in the case. What began as a local dispute had become a landmark investigation into homeowners association practices. Investigative journalists from 3 different networks crowded the back of the room, their cameras capturing every moment. "This isn't just about one neighborhood," Representative Gonzalez announced, her voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. "This is about systemic abuse of power and community governance." Jack Peterson presented a meticulously documented portfolio. Years of Margaret Holloway's enforcement records told a story of calculated harassment. Each page revealed a pattern of targeting specific families, mostly young, mostly minorities, always those with the least resources to fight back. Margaret sat rigid, her carefully pressed suit now looking like armor under siege. Her nephew Bradley, the junior lawyer, had become more of a liability than an asset. His aggressive legal strategies had backfired spectacularly, turning public opinion into a tsunami of support for the Martinez family. The hearing revealed more than just Margaret's actions. It exposed a broader system of unaccountable neighborhood governance. HOAs across the state had operated like mini-dictatorships, wielding power through endless bureaucratic mechanisms. Tommy's website, HOAhorrors.com, had become a clearinghouse for community complaints. Thousands of stories poured in, families fined for basketball hoops, for children's chalk drawings, for flowers planted slightly outside approved zones. "I just wanted to build a snowman," Tommy testified, his voice steady and clear. "And instead, I learned how some people use rules to hurt others." The room fell silent. Elena and Roberto exchanged a look, part pride, part disbelief at how their quiet family had become the catalyst for a broader movement. Their son had done what years of community organizing could not. He'd exposed the human cost of bureaucratic tyranny. Margaret's world was collapsing. Her carefully constructed network of influence crumbled with each piece of evidence. Board members who had once feared her now distanced themselves. Her own legal team was preparing exit strategies. Representative Gonzalez unveiled proposed legislation, the Snowman Bill, which would impose strict oversight on homeowners associations. It would require transparent enforcement, limit arbitrary fines, and create an independent review board for community complaints. Sometimes, Gonzalez told the packed room, change comes from the most unexpected places. In this case, from a 12-year-old and a snowman. The hearing was more than a legal proceeding. It was a public reckoning with a system that had prioritized conformity over community, rules over humanity. As cameras flashed and reporters scribbled notes, Tommy Martinez sat quietly. He looked less like a victor and more like someone who had simply told a truth that needed telling. Outside, the winter wind carried whispers of change. 6 months after the snowman incident, Pinewood Estates looked like a different neighborhood. The HOA board had been completely restructured. Margaret Holloway sat on the sidelines, her once formidable influence reduced to whispers and sideways glances. Jack Peterson now served as the interim board president, implementing radical changes that prioritized community over compliance. Tommy Martinez had become an unexpected celebrity. Speaking engagements, podcast interviews, and even a book deal transformed the 12-year-old from a local hero to a national symbol of youth activism. His parents watched with a mixture of pride and bewilderment as their son navigated his newfound platform. The Snowman Bill had passed with overwhelming support, becoming a model legislation for community governance reform across the state. Homeowners associations would never be the same. Elena and Roberto used their newfound visibility to advocate for more inclusive community practices. Elena spoke at conferences about the importance of compassionate leadership, while Roberto developed curriculum materials about civic engagement for local schools. Margaret's world had shrunk dramatically. The social circles that once revered her now avoided her. Her meticulously maintained home, once a symbol of suburban perfection, became a monument to her fallen status. The perfectly trimmed hedges looked slightly overgrown. The paint needed touching up. Small imperfections she would have once condemned now defined her own property. During a rare public appearance at a local coffee shop, Margaret overheard a group of parents discussing Tommy's latest speaking engagement. Her hand trembled slightly as she stirred her latte, a tremor that would have been unthinkable during her HOA reign. Tommy's website, HOAhorrors.com, had evolved into a significant platform for community advocacy. What started as a response to a destroyed snowman had become a national movement challenging bureaucratic overreach in residential communities. The Martinez family's home became a gathering place for neighbors. Weekend barbecues replaced the tense, rule-bound interactions of the past. Children played freely on lawns. Decorations appeared without fear of fines. The neighborhood breathed with a new kind of freedom. Jack Peterson reflected on the transformation during a community meeting. "We lost sight of what really matters," he told the gathered residents. "A community isn't about perfect lawns or identical mailboxes. It's about people, about supporting each other." Tommy, now more mature but still carrying the spark of rebellion, continued to speak out. His message was simple but powerful. Rules should serve people, not control them. The green-painted snowman had become a local legend. A local artist had created a small statue commemorating the moment, placed strategically in the community center's garden. Children would ask about the story and older residents would smile, remembering the winter when everything changed. Margaret Holloway watched from a distance, a ghost of her former self. The world she had so carefully controlled had slipped through her fingers, replaced by something more vibrant, more human. As summer approached, Pinewood Estates bloomed not with uniformity but with individual expression. Flowers of different colors, decorations that told stories, lawns that reflected the families who lived there. A community reborn from the ashes of a single green-painted snowman.